What if the last digit of your birth year could predict your destiny? It sounds crazy, right? But what if it's true? What if something as small and seemingly insignificant as the final number of the year you were born could tell you exactly what kind of life you're meant to live? I can already hear you thinking, that's impossible. How could something like that control my future? But just bear with me for a moment. Meet Emily, a 28-year-old tech enthusiast living in New York City, working as a junior developer at a small startup. She's smart, ambitious, and has always felt like she was meant for something bigger. But, like many of us, she finds herself stuck in the daily grind, questioning whether her life will ever amount to something extraordinary. She's never been one to believe in fate, but one night, as she scrolled through a late-night tech forum, Emily found something that would change the way she looked at the world forever. It all started with a question in the middle of an online post: what if the last digit of your birth year could reveal your purpose? Curiosity piqued, Emily dove deeper. She laughed it off at first. It sounded ridiculous, almost like some pseudoscience that was bound to be disproven. But the more she read, the more fascinated she became. There were stories of successful entrepreneurs, actors, and world-changing leaders who swore by this theory. A strange pattern began to emerge. The theory suggested that the last digit of your birth year wasn't just a number, it was a sign, a clue to the life you were destined to lead. It was like a secret code that unlocked your true potential. Emily found herself captivated by the idea, feeling something stir inside her. Was this the key to unlocking her future? Suddenly, she could hear her inner voice asking, what if this could change everything? The concept seemed too simple to be real. But what if it wasn't? What if it was the missing piece Emily had been searching for all her life? She hesitated for a moment, wondering whether it was worth pursuing, but her curiosity got the best of her. Without overthinking, she picked up her phone and calculated the last digit of her birth year. She was born in 1996, so the last digit was 6. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she read what the number 6 meant. According to this mysterious theory, people born in years ending with the number 6 were meant to be leaders, visionaries, trailblazers who changed the world. They were destined for greatness, but it came with a heavy responsibility. Failure was not an option. Her mind raced. She thought of Elon Musk, who was born in 1971. His vision for the future, his mission to change the world, seemed to align perfectly with what the number 6 promised. Emily's hands trembled as she kept reading. Could this theory really be true? Could the future she'd always dreamed of, one full of excitement, innovation, and impact, really be tied to something as simple as the last digit of her birth year? The question lingered in the back of her mind as she closed her phone and stared at the New York skyline through her apartment window. The city that never sleeps, always moving forward, always evolving. Maybe it was time for her to take that same leap. But what if the leap led to failure? Emily's mind raced back and forth between excitement and doubt. She had always been a realist, a woman who believed in hard work over destiny. Yet, something about this idea, this theory that the universe had a plan for her, resonated deep inside her. Could it be possible that she had been blind to her own potential? She could hear her mother's voice in her head, don't get swept up in things that aren't real. Keep your feet on the ground. But there was another voice, a louder one, that told her to go for it. To trust in this strange connection between her birth year and her future. Could this be the moment that changed everything? Emily knew she needed to dig deeper. The more she thought about it, the more it felt like the universe had dropped this strange message into her lap for a reason. With a mix of anticipation and uncertainty, Emily found herself typing in the search bar, Elon Musk's birth year and the secret to his success. She clicked on a few links, hoping to unravel the mystery behind this bizarre theory. As she read through article after article, the dots began to connect. Stories of people who had used the last digit of their birth year to unlock their true potential filled her screen. They spoke of visionary entrepreneurs, world leaders, and celebrities who shared a secret: they had all embraced the power of their birth year. The more she read, the more convinced she became that there was something to this. But what about her? Was she really destined to change the world? Was this number a mere coincidence, or was it a sign? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden buzz of her phone. It was a text from her best friend, Sarah. "What's up? You've been quiet lately. You okay?" Emily paused, then replied, "Yeah, just thinking about something. Something crazy." Sarah responded almost immediately, "Crazy? What's going on?" Emily hesitated before typing back, "What if the last digit of your birth year could determine your destiny?" There was a long pause before Sarah finally texted back, "That sounds insane, but also kind of interesting. Let me know what you find out." The conversation ended, but Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. The more she read, the more her thoughts became consumed by this idea. Could it really be this simple? Could the answers she was seeking be as easy as looking at the last digit of her birth year? As the night grew deeper, Emily sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. It was like the world had shifted in an instant, and she was on the edge of something life-changing. Could the universe be trying to tell her something? Or was this all just a coincidence? She didn't know yet. But one thing was for sure, her life was about to take a turn she never expected. And everything, it seemed, was connected to the last digit of her birth year. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Emily sat there, looking at the vast city in front of her, the uncertainty seemed to fade. She was on the verge of something bigger than she ever imagined. It was time to find out whether this theory had the power to shape her destiny. And so, her journey began. Emily had always been a dreamer, but she was also practical, perhaps too practical at times. Growing up in the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, she was surrounded by a community where everyone knew each other's business, and the expectations were clear. The town was quiet, predictable. Emily's parents owned a local bookstore, a cozy, charming place that smelled of old paper and fresh coffee. It was the kind of store that felt like home, a place where stories were shared over warm mugs of tea and the hum of conversation echoed through the rooms. But Emily wasn't like the other kids in Millbrook. She always felt like she was destined for something more than the ordinary. While her friends had dreams of settling down, starting families, and running businesses in town, Emily's heart had always been drawn to the unknown. She devoured books about space, technology, and the future, and the names of innovators like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk became as familiar to her as the faces of her own family. She would spend hours lost in thought, imagining what it would be like to change the world, just like they did. Her parents, however, never quite understood her need for something beyond Millbrook. Her mother, Carol, a warm, practical woman with a sharp sense of humor, often told her, "Emily, the world's not always as exciting as the books you read. Sometimes it's enough to be content with what you have." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant for something bigger. She often found herself staring out the window of her childhood bedroom, watching the world go by, feeling like an outsider in her own life. She loved her parents, loved the bookstore, but it wasn't enough. She didn't want a predictable life, a life where every day was the same as the last. She longed for adventure, for the kind of excitement that could only come from making a mark on the world. When she was in high school, Emily got her first taste of what it meant to step into the unknown. At 16, she taught herself how to code, sneaking late-night hours on her computer to figure out programming languages. Her friends didn't understand it, they were busy with school dances and football games, while Emily stayed up late, her mind consumed by lines of code and the thrill of building something new. Her passion for technology grew, and by the time she graduated, Emily was accepted into a tech program at a prestigious university in New York City. It was a leap she never thought she'd be able to make, leaving her small town, leaving the comfort of her family's bookstore, but she did it. She moved to the city, with only her laptop, a suitcase of clothes, and a dream of one day changing the world. The first few months in New York were a blur of excitement and loneliness. The city, with its towering skyscrapers and endless hustle, felt like both a dream and a nightmare. Emily loved the energy, but she felt small in the vast sea of ambition that surrounded her. Every corner of the city seemed to pulse with the promise of something bigger, but she couldn't help but feel like she was just another face in the crowd. She threw herself into her studies, determined to prove that she belonged. She joined coding competitions, volunteered at hackathons, and worked part-time at a tech startup to pay the bills. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't easy, but it was a start. By the time Emily graduated, she had built a portfolio of projects, but still, something was missing. She had the skills, the ambition, and the drive, but she didn't know what to do with them. That's when she landed the job at a small startup, a company that was still in its infancy but promised to disrupt the tech industry with its groundbreaking ideas. It wasn't her dream job, but it was a step closer. A step into a world where she could finally make a difference. Despite her success, Emily was still searching for something. She still didn't feel like she was truly living the life she was meant to. She had the job, the apartment, and the city, but deep down, she felt like she was just going through the motions, stuck in a routine that didn't truly satisfy her. It was around this time that she began to hear whispers about a theory that would change everything. The idea that the last digit of your birth year could unlock your true purpose, her true purpose. The idea that everything, from the relationships you formed to the path you took in life, could be connected to a number. It was a simple concept, but for Emily, it was like a light bulb had gone off. Could it be that her destiny was written in the stars, or rather, in the numbers of her birth year? Emily had never been one to follow superstitions or blindly believe in things without evidence, but something about the theory intrigued her. There was something compelling about the idea that her life, her ambitions, and her potential had already been mapped out for her, just waiting for her to figure it out. Maybe, just maybe, this was the key to unlocking the future she had always dreamed of. But Emily was skeptical. She wasn't the type to believe in fate. She believed in hard work, grit, and determination. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to leave her future up to some arbitrary number. Yet, something about this theory kept nagging at her, tugging at the back of her mind. It wasn't just the idea that the last digit of her birth year could define her. It was the thought that maybe, just maybe, the universe had a bigger plan for her. She had spent so many years feeling like she was meant for something more, and now, here it was, staring her in the face. Could the last digit of her birth year really be the key to understanding her purpose? As Emily sat at her desk in her small New York apartment, the city lights flickering outside her window, she couldn't help but wonder, what if this was the moment that changed everything? For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a surge of hope, a spark of excitement. Maybe the answers she had been searching for had been right in front of her all along. Maybe her life wasn't just a series of random events. Maybe there was a bigger plan at play, one that she was only beginning to understand. And with that thought, she typed in her birth year into the search bar again, ready to discover just how much truth was hidden in a number. As the days passed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. But with every step she took toward embracing the theory about the last digit of her birth year, the nagging voice of doubt grew louder. Was she really on the verge of something life-altering, or was she just chasing after another false hope? The more she thought about it, the more questions flooded her mind. Was this just another of those self-help theories, promising magical transformations that never really panned out? Was she really meant to be a visionary, just because she happened to be born in 1996? And if this theory was true, why hadn't anything major happened in her life so far? Why had she spent all these years feeling like an underdog, working tirelessly at a job that, while interesting, was far from groundbreaking? The tension between belief and skepticism grew heavier every day. Emily found herself diving deeper into research about the theory. She spent hours combing through forums, reading about others who believed in the idea that your birth year dictated your future. Some people swore by it, saying they felt more aligned with their true calling once they embraced their number. But others claimed that the whole concept was just another gimmick, a distraction from the hard work and dedication needed to achieve success. Still, as Emily sifted through these conflicting opinions, one thing became clear: people born in years ending with 6, like her, were not only believed to be destined for leadership and success, but were also expected to face immense challenges along the way. According to the theory, the potential for greatness came with a hefty price: the pressure to live up to the expectations and responsibilities that came with their role as world changers. Her own experiences in the tech world made her question everything. Despite the buzz around her startup's potential, Emily often felt like a cog in a machine. She was surrounded by more experienced professionals, people who had been in the industry longer than she had, and while she respected their expertise, it made her feel inadequate. She had an idea that could revolutionize how software was built, but every time she brought it up, it was met with doubt or indifference. The bigger players in the tech world seemed light years ahead of her, and the world-changing opportunities she had dreamed of felt more like distant fantasies than something within her reach. One day, as Emily was sitting in the company's sleek, glass-walled conference room, her thoughts wandered again to the theory. A fellow engineer, Alex, was presenting his latest feature update for their app, a seemingly simple change, but one that had taken him months to develop. He was confident in his presentation, answering questions with ease as the other team members nodded in approval. But Emily's mind was elsewhere. She'd been trying to push herself to come up with her own big idea, something that would stand out. She wanted to be seen, to be heard. More than anything, she wanted to prove to herself and others that she could make a difference. But with each passing day, she began to feel the weight of her ambitions and the pressure to succeed. What if she didn't live up to the potential that the number 6 had promised her? What if she wasn't cut out to be a leader, a visionary? The self-doubt was overwhelming. After the meeting, Emily walked back to her desk, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She sat down in her chair, staring at the lines of code on her computer screen. The more she tried to focus, the more her mind raced with thoughts of failure. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling that she was falling short of the greatness she believed she was destined for. It didn't help that her team had recently hit a setback. A major bug in the app had caused significant delays, and now, the pressure was mounting to fix it quickly. Emily had been assigned to help with troubleshooting, but the more she looked at the code, the more she felt like she was in over her head. The clock was ticking, and the tension was rising. It was during one of these stressful moments, when she was sitting in front of her screen, staring at the endless lines of code, that she received a message from Sarah. "Hey, are you okay? You seem a little off lately." Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. She felt exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained. She quickly typed back, "I'm fine, just a lot going on at work. You know how it is." Sarah didn't buy it. "I get it. But you can talk to me, right?" Emily hesitated before typing, "I've been thinking about something lately. Something strange. There's this theory that the last digit of your birth year determines your life's purpose. And I think it's true. I feel like I'm meant for something big, but it feels like the more I try, the more I fall short." There was a pause before Sarah replied. "Wait, really? That's interesting. But maybe it's just pressure. You've been working non-stop. Give yourself a break." Emily read Sarah's message and let out a frustrated breath. She had heard the same thing over and over: she was working too hard, burning herself out. But it wasn't just about work. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of something great. She had this feeling deep inside her that she was meant to make a difference, but she couldn't seem to break free from the chains of doubt that bound her. As she sat in the quiet of her apartment later that evening, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The theory about the last digit of her birth year had sparked hope, but it also brought with it an immense weight. Could she truly live up to the expectations? Could she become the leader and visionary the number 6 promised her to be? Her thoughts spiraled, each question feeding the next. If the number 6 was truly a sign of greatness, then why did everything feel so hard? Why did it feel like she was always struggling to stay afloat in a world of giants? And yet, amid the doubts and questions, Emily couldn't let go of the belief that she was destined for something more. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be easy. Maybe, just maybe, the struggle was part of the journey. As she closed her eyes and let the city sounds lull her to sleep, she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't ignore the pull any longer. Whatever the number 6 meant, it was time to find out. She had to face her fears, confront the doubts, and continue on the path that was starting to seem less like coincidence and more like fate. And in the back of her mind, a thought kept resurfacing: was this the beginning of her journey to greatness, or just the start of another failed attempt? Either way, she was about to find out. Emily's mind buzzed with excitement and trepidation in the days following her deep dive into the theory of the last digit of her birth year. The weight of uncertainty still hung over her, but it was slowly giving way to an undeniable spark of curiosity. It was as if the universe had handed her a puzzle, one that she couldn't ignore, no matter how much she tried to reason with herself. Could the number 6 really be the key to her purpose? Could it truly unlock the path she'd been waiting for? Still, Emily wasn't ready to jump headfirst into something as mysterious and intangible as this theory. She had spent years building her career, crafting a life she believed in, and the idea that everything she'd been working for could be tied to something as abstract as a number felt strange. But she couldn't deny the pull anymore. There was something magnetic about the theory that had embedded itself in her thoughts, something that made her feel like she was at the edge of discovering something that could change her life forever. She took a deep breath as she sat at her desk that Friday afternoon, staring at her computer screen. The lines of code seemed to blur before her eyes, and the frustration she'd been feeling for weeks was bubbling up inside her. She'd been working on fixing the bug in the app, but the more she tried, the more the problems seemed to multiply. Her mind wandered back to the theory. What if she could apply it to her own life? What if, by embracing this number, she could unlock a new path, one where she didn't feel like she was constantly struggling to keep up with the world? It was time for a change. Emily knew it. And so, with a mixture of hesitation and determination, she made a decision: she would take a leap of faith. The next morning, she woke up early and made her way to a small coffee shop in the heart of the city. She needed space to think, to reflect, and to plan her next move. The coffee shop, with its cozy atmosphere and the comforting hum of quiet conversations, felt like the perfect place for her to dive into the unknown. She pulled out her laptop, opened a blank document, and started typing. The last digit of my birth year is 6. That means leadership. It means ambition. It means greatness. But does it really mean that I'm destined for something extraordinary? She paused, looking at her reflection in the screen. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger, someone caught between the life she'd built and the life she wanted to create. Emily could feel the weight of the decision she was making. It wasn't just about the theory, it was about everything she'd ever wanted. It was about finally breaking free from the limitations she'd placed on herself and stepping into the person she was meant to become. With a deep breath, Emily made a bold move. She reached out to the founder of the startup she'd been working at for the past year. She had an idea, one that she'd kept to herself for months, afraid of rejection, afraid of failure. But now, she was ready to share it. The email was brief but to the point. Hi, Ben. I've been thinking a lot about our product and I believe I have an idea that could help take us to the next level. It's a feature that would revolutionize how we interact with our users, and I think it's something that no other company is offering right now. I'd love to discuss it with you. She hit send, her heart racing. It was a risk. She had no guarantee that Ben would even respond, let alone take her idea seriously. But this was her moment. She had to take it. A few hours later, Emily received a response. Hi Emily, thanks for reaching out. I'd love to hear more about your idea. Can we set up a time to meet this week? Her stomach flipped. She could hardly believe it. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to prove herself. She immediately scheduled a meeting for the following day. The night before the meeting, Emily barely slept. She kept replaying everything in her head, the pitch, the idea, the possible outcomes. Would Ben think it was a great idea, or would he dismiss it as impractical? What if she wasn't as ready as she thought? What if she failed? But then, she remembered the theory, the number 6. It was supposed to symbolize leadership and ambition. It was a sign that she was meant to take risks, to step into her power. She couldn't let fear hold her back any longer. The next day, Emily walked into the sleek office building with a renewed sense of purpose. She had made it this far, and now, it was time to go all in. She entered the conference room, where Ben was already sitting, his laptop open in front of him. "Hey, Emily. Great to see you," Ben greeted her, giving her a warm smile. "I'm excited to hear what you've been thinking about." Emily sat down, her hands slightly trembling. She took a deep breath, then launched into her pitch. As she spoke, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline rush through her veins. The idea wasn't just a feature, it was a game-changer. She could see it in Ben's eyes as she talked, the way he leaned forward, clearly engaged in what she was saying. "Emily, this is incredible," Ben said after she finished. "I think this could really set us apart from the competition. Let's take this to the next level." Her heart soared. This was it. This was her moment. The meeting ended with Ben asking her to start working on a prototype. It was the beginning of something big, something she had only dreamed of. As Emily walked out of the office building, she felt like she was floating. The weight of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by the rush of possibility. For the first time in years, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. But as she walked through the busy streets of New York, a new thought crept into her mind. This was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be full of challenges, both internal and external. There would be moments when she would doubt herself, when the weight of responsibility would feel overwhelming. And there would be times when the pressure to live up to her potential would feel impossible. But one thing was certain, she was no longer afraid to face the unknown. She had taken the leap, and now, there was no turning back. The world was hers to conquer. And Emily was ready. Emily sat at her desk, staring at the email that had just arrived. It was from Ben, the founder of her startup. She had been eagerly awaiting his response to the prototype she had put together, hoping he'd see the value in her idea. The idea that she believed could truly change the trajectory of the company, and her career. Her fingers hovered over the mouse as she opened the email. She had been running on adrenaline ever since their last meeting, where Ben had seemed excited by her pitch. She was ready for more good news, ready for the next step. She wasn't prepared for what she was about to read. "Hi Emily, after discussing your proposal with the team, we've decided to move forward with some other ideas. We appreciate your effort, but we're going to put this one on hold for now. I know this is disappointing, but I'm sure there will be other opportunities for you to contribute." The words blurred before her eyes. She read the email again, just to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. But no, there it was. The rejection. She couldn't breathe. She didn't know why, but the sting of the words hit harder than she had anticipated. Maybe it was the way it happened, so suddenly, so decisively. The idea that she'd poured her heart and soul into, the one that she believed could be her breakthrough, was dismissed with a simple sentence. A wave of emotions crashed over her. Hurt. Confusion. Anger. The thoughts raced through her mind. Why had she been so sure of this? She had believed, deep down, that this was the moment where everything would change. That her leap of faith would finally pay off. But now? Now she felt like she had made a fool of herself. Was this what the number 6 had promised? Was this the leadership and greatness it spoke of? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. It was Sarah. "Hey, I know you've been busy. How's everything going with the project?" Emily stared at the screen for a moment before typing back a response. I got rejected. They're not moving forward with my idea. Almost immediately, Sarah replied. Oh no. I'm so sorry, Emily. But hey, don't give up. You're too talented to let this stop you. This is just one setback. You've got so much potential, and you'll find the right opportunity. Trust me. Emily read Sarah's words, but they didn't sink in. She didn't feel like she had potential right now. She felt defeated. The weight of failure was pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She walked out of her office, the cool air of the city hitting her face as she stepped onto the sidewalk. It was like everything had come crashing down in a single moment. She wasn't sure how to process what had happened, how to keep moving forward after this rejection. Her mind kept circling back to the email, the words of Ben, "We're putting this one on hold," echoing in her mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe it wasn't as good as she thought it was. Maybe it wasn't enough to make a difference. She walked aimlessly through the streets, not sure where she was going or what she was doing. The city around her seemed indifferent to her internal chaos. People hustled past her, their lives continuing as though nothing had changed, while she was frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. The more she walked, the more she realized how deeply this rejection had shaken her. She had always been driven by the idea that she was meant for something big, something world-changing. But now, standing there in the middle of the bustling city, she couldn't shake the doubt that had taken root in her heart. What if she wasn't cut out for greatness? What if the number 6, the symbol of ambition and leadership, was just a story she had told herself? Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. She didn't recognize the number, but something urged her to answer it. Hello, she answered, her voice shaky. Hi, is this Emily? A male voice asked. It was calm, but there was an underlying urgency to it. Yes, this is Emily. Who's calling? This is Jake from Innovate Tech. We've been following your work at the startup, and we're really impressed. We'd love to discuss a potential collaboration with you. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Innovate Tech. A competitor in the same industry. They were known for being one of the most forward-thinking companies in tech. Was this a joke? Was someone playing a prank on her? Are you serious? She blurted out, before she could stop herself. Jake laughed softly. Yes, I'm serious. We believe your vision aligns with the direction we're heading in. We'd love to talk about what a partnership could look like. Her mind was spinning. She had just been rejected by her own company, and now, out of nowhere, a leading competitor was reaching out to her. What was going on? Can we set up a meeting for next week? Jake continued. We think you could be a great fit for some exciting projects we have coming up. Emily felt a mix of disbelief and excitement bubbling inside her. She had been on the brink of giving up, ready to accept that maybe her big break was just a pipe dream. But now, here was a chance, a real chance, that might turn everything around. I'd love to meet, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. Let's set it up. As she hung up the phone, her thoughts raced. Could this be the universe telling her that she wasn't meant to give up just yet? Was this the next step in her journey? Or was it another distraction, another shiny object that would lead her down a different path? For a moment, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. This could be the opportunity she needed. The kind of breakthrough that would not only validate her but prove that she was on the right track, even when everything seemed to fall apart. But she also knew that this wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would come with its own set of challenges, just like the rejection she had just faced. But one thing was clear, she wasn't about to let fear or doubt dictate her future. She had come too far to back down now. As she walked back to her apartment that evening, the weight in her chest had lightened. The shock of rejection still stung, but she now had a new focus, a new purpose. The emotional roller coaster she had been riding was far from over, but Emily was ready to face whatever came next. Because one thing she knew for sure, she wasn't done yet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? A few weeks had passed since Emily's surprising phone call with Jake from Innovate Tech. The shock of the sudden opportunity had worn off, but a new sense of resolve had taken its place. She knew she was standing at a crossroads. The rejection from her own startup had stung deeply, but the unexpected offer from Innovate Tech had ignited something inside her, a fire she hadn't known she still had. It felt like the universe was giving her a second chance, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. But as much as Emily had been driven by the thrill of the unexpected, the journey hadn't been easy. There had been sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and more than a few tears. The weight of the decisions she was making had been heavier than she'd anticipated. Would this new path with Innovate Tech be the right one? Was she ready to leave behind everything she had worked for at her startup? The questions kept her up at night, but the answer was becoming clearer with each passing day. One morning, Emily stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the city below. The hustle and bustle of New York was alive with energy, but for once, it felt like she was truly seeing it. The lights, the sounds, the people, it all had a different meaning now. She was part of this vast, ever-changing landscape, and she finally understood that her place in it wasn't defined by a job title or a single idea. It was about her willingness to take risks, to evolve, and to step boldly into the unknown. That afternoon, Emily walked into the Innovate Tech offices for her first official meeting. She had spent days preparing, researching the company's projects, and outlining her ideas for potential collaborations. She felt more confident now, as if she had shed the doubts and fears that had clouded her mind when she first received the offer. This was her moment to prove herself, not just to Innovate Tech, but to herself. Jake greeted her with a warm handshake as she walked into the sleek, modern conference room. The space was bright, open, and full of energy, just like the company itself. As they sat down, he immediately got to the point. "Emily, we've been really impressed with your vision. We believe you can bring something unique to the table here at Innovate Tech. We want to offer you a role leading one of our new projects, something that's right up your alley." Emily's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for. "Are you ready for this challenge?" Jake asked, his eyes gleaming with excitement. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. She thought about everything she had gone through to get here, the rejection, the self-doubt, the struggles. But as she looked across the table at Jake, she knew this was exactly where she was meant to be. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready." Over the next few weeks, Emily dove headfirst into her new role at Innovate Tech. The challenges came quickly, but so did the rewards. She found herself surrounded by a team of like-minded individuals who shared her passion for innovation and progress. The work was intense, but it felt different. It felt like she was finally making a real impact. And slowly, the pieces of her life started to fall into place. She had taken a leap of faith, and though the journey had been filled with uncertainty and setbacks, she was beginning to see the fruits of her labor. Her work was no longer just about coding and creating. It was about leading, shaping the future, and making a difference. As she looked back on the events that had brought her to this point, the rejection, the confusion, the unexpected opportunities, Emily realized how much she had learned. She had discovered that setbacks weren't the end. They were simply a detour, a chance to reassess, and a stepping stone towards something greater. She had learned that leadership wasn't just about success, it was about resilience, about the courage to keep going when things didn't go as planned. She also realized that the number 6, her birth year's final digit, hadn't been a promise of instant success. Instead, it had been a symbol of something deeper. It had represented the qualities of leadership, ambition, and greatness, but it also spoke to the journey of personal growth. True greatness wasn't handed to her, it was something she had to earn through hard work, perseverance, and the willingness to take risks, even when it seemed impossible. One evening, as she sat at her apartment reflecting on the changes in her life, Emily finally understood the true meaning behind the theory. It wasn't about the number itself, it was about what the number represented. The power to take control of her destiny. The courage to chase her dreams, no matter how unattainable they seemed. The realization that her journey was her own to shape, and that no one else could define her potential but herself. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. "How's everything going? I haven't heard from you in a while." Emily smiled as she typed back. "It's going well. I've learned a lot. It's been a crazy ride, but I'm exactly where I need to be." "I knew you'd get there." Sarah replied. "I'm so proud of you." Emily leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of her journey settle in. She had made it through the tough times, the doubts, and the setbacks. She had learned that true leadership wasn't about avoiding failure, it was about embracing it, learning from it, and using it to fuel the next step. And as she thought about the future, she felt a quiet sense of pride wash over her. She didn't know what the next chapter of her life would hold, but she knew she was ready for it. Because she had learned one of the most important lessons of all, no matter what life threw at her, she was strong enough to face it, and she was ready to keep moving forward. "The journey never ends," she whispered to herself, looking out the window at the city lights. And that's exactly how it's meant to be. With that, Emily closed her laptop, stood up, and walked to the window, letting the sound of the city wash over her. The future was uncertain, but she no longer feared it. Because now, she knew that her destiny was hers to shape, and she was ready to take the next step, whatever it might be. It had been a month since Emily had taken the leap and joined Innovate Tech. The transition had been everything she had hoped for and more. She was thriving in her new role, surrounded by passionate, like-minded individuals, and feeling the rush of excitement that came with every new project. For the first time in a long while, it felt like she was in control of her own destiny. But just as she had started to feel settled, life threw her yet another curveball. It began with an early morning email from Jake, the CEO of Innovate Tech. He had been a great mentor so far, offering guidance, support, and insight into the company's vision. But this email was different. It was terse, its subject line simply reading, "Urgent, we need to talk." Emily's stomach dropped as she opened it. "Emily, we've run into some unforeseen circumstances with the project we've been developing. We need you to take the lead on something new. Please meet with me as soon as possible today. This will be a critical pivot for the team." The sense of calm she had been enjoying vanished in an instant. Critical pivot. Something had happened. Something big. She quickly glanced at the clock. It was 8 a.m., and the meeting with Jake was scheduled for 10. She had 2 hours to prepare, but she had no idea what was coming. She paced back and forth, her mind racing. What could it be? Was there an issue with the project she had been working on? Had the team lost faith in her? Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Sarah. "So, how's life at Innovate Tech? How's the new project going?" Emily's fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of what to say. The truth was, she was still in the thick of things were going well, but now there was a sense of impending uncertainty hanging over her. She texted back, trying to keep her tone light. "It's going well. But I just got some crazy news. I have a meeting with Jake in 2 hours, and he said we're going to have to pivot. Not sure what's going on, but I'll keep you posted." She closed her phone and quickly gathered her thoughts. She wasn't going to let herself get rattled by the unknown. Not this time. She had learned from her past setbacks that the unexpected twists were just part of the journey. If she was going to face whatever challenge lay ahead, she had to be ready to adapt. 10 a.m. arrived, and Emily walked into the conference room where Jake was already waiting. The energy in the room was different today, tense, almost electric. Jake sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "Hey, Emily, Jake said, his voice calm but with a hint of urgency. Thanks for meeting with me on such short notice. I'll get straight to the point. We've had some changes in the company, and it's going to affect the project we've been working on. Emily nodded, her heart racing. What changes? She thought. We've just learned that a major competitor is ramping up a similar initiative to the one we've been developing. They're ahead of us in terms of resources, and they've started reaching out to some of our potential partners. It's a serious threat, Jake continued. Emily's mind whirled. A competitor? It sounded like they were facing a real crisis. This wasn't just a minor roadblock, this was a game changer. Jake paused, clearly weighing his next words carefully. I'm going to need you to take over the development of a new, more advanced prototype. Something that can put us ahead of the curve and outpace the competition. It's going to be a lot of work, but I know you're up for it. This project could determine the future of Innovate Tech. Emily felt a rush of adrenaline. The stakes had just been raised significantly. But even in the face of such a daunting challenge, she didn't feel overwhelmed. In fact, she felt the familiar spark of determination flicker inside her. This was the kind of challenge she had been waiting for. One that would push her to the limit, force her to grow, and prove what she was capable of. She met Jake's gaze, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts inside her. I'm in, she said. I'll get to work on it immediately. Jake smiled. I knew I could count on you, Emily. This is going to be tough, but I'm confident you'll lead the team to success. As the meeting wrapped up, Emily left the room feeling more focused than ever. The path ahead would be full of obstacles, but it was the kind of challenge she had longed for. Innovate Tech needed her. She had been handed the opportunity of a lifetime to step up and show her true potential. However, the weight of responsibility was heavier than she had anticipated. She spent the next few days poring over data, meeting with engineers and designers, brainstorming ideas for a prototype that would set Innovate Tech apart from the competition. Every conversation, every decision felt more critical than ever. But the pressure was beginning to take its toll. Emily found herself working late into the night, sacrificing sleep and socializing in exchange for what felt like non-stop innovation. She had to make this work. There was no room for failure. One evening, as she sat hunched over her desk, she felt the familiar ache in her shoulders from hours of work. Her eyes were strained, and her mind was starting to feel foggy. She had been so focused on the project that she hadn't even noticed how much she was pushing herself. It was only when her phone buzzed that she realized it was well past midnight. It was a message from Sarah. Emily, I know you're deep into this project, but don't forget to take care of yourself. You've got this, but don't burn out. You've come so far, and you don't want to lose sight of what really matters. Emily stared at the screen for a moment. She's right, Emily thought. I can't keep going at this pace. I have to find balance. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. The quiet of the room seemed to embrace her for a moment, and for the first time in days, Emily allowed herself to breathe. This is just the beginning, she thought. I can handle it. But I need to take care of myself along the way. It wasn't just about the project anymore, it was about the journey, the process, and the strength it took to face what was ahead. And as Emily sat there, in the stillness of the night, she felt a quiet but powerful resolve building inside her. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. The weeks following the announcement were a whirlwind. Emily was living and breathing Innovate Tech's new prototype, diving into endless meetings, conference calls, and research. She barely saw the sun anymore, spending countless hours in front of her laptop, drafting plans, working through the specs with engineers, and brainstorming with her team. The competition, she learned, was not just formidable, they were relentless. Every day brought a new challenge, a new twist, but the feeling that she was at the edge of something huge kept her going. But with each passing day, the pressure mounted. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders like a constant, heavy presence. Her team relied on her leadership, and Innovate Tech was counting on her to lead them through this storm. Every decision felt monumental. Every missed detail was a potential disaster. Her mind was always spinning, always moving toward the next challenge, the next problem to solve. And it wasn't just the pressure of the project itself, it was the constant fear of failure that lurked in the back of her mind. What if this didn't work? What if they couldn't beat the competition? What if, despite all her efforts, she couldn't deliver? It wasn't long before Emily realized that she was on the verge of burnout. Her energy was drained, her body physically exhausted from the sleepless nights and endless hours at her desk. She'd catch herself zoning out during meetings, unable to focus or even remember the last few things she'd said. Her eyes were bloodshot, her nerves were frayed, and the thrill that had once fueled her passion now felt like a distant memory. One late evening, while working in her office at Innovate Tech, Emily found herself staring blankly at her screen. The numbers, the graphs, the designs, they all blurred together. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't know what to type next. What am I doing, she thought, the question echoing in her mind. It wasn't just a reflection on the project, it was a deeper question about everything she had been pushing herself toward. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The noise of the office had died down, it was late, and only a few lights remained on in the building. The sense of isolation was suffocating. She missed her family. She missed her friends. Most of all, she missed feeling like herself. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her reverie. It was Sarah. "Hey Em, I haven't heard from you in a while. How's the project going?" Emily hesitated before typing back. How could she explain to Sarah, someone who had always been there for her, that she felt lost? That she felt as if the very thing that had once filled her with passion was now draining her dry. "It's intense," Emily replied. "I'm working non-stop. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up." A few moments later, Sarah responded. "You know you can't pour from an empty cup, right?" The words hit Emily like a ton of bricks. "I get that you're in the thick of things, but you need to take a step back. The project will be there tomorrow, but you need to take care of yourself. We've been through a lot together, and I'm not going anywhere. I just want you to remember that you matter too, Em." The simple message caused a lump to form in Emily's throat. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. It wasn't just about the project or the pressure, it was about her. She had lost sight of herself, of what made her Emily instead of just a work machine. "Thanks, Sarah. I needed to hear that." Emily typed back, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed send. But even as she sent the message, she wasn't sure what to do next. Could she really step back? Could she allow herself to take a break when the stakes were so high? The following morning, Emily woke up later than usual. She had finally allowed herself to sleep through the night, and as she stretched and yawned, she felt a small sense of relief wash over her. Maybe she wasn't as invincible as she had once thought. Maybe the key to succeeding in this venture wasn't just about pushing herself beyond her limits, but about finding balance, about knowing when to rest and when to fight. As she prepared to head into the office, she glanced at herself in the mirror. There was a change in her, subtle, but undeniable. She wasn't the same person who had eagerly joined Innovate Tech, bursting with excitement and ambition. She was different now. More seasoned. More aware. And while it felt strange to acknowledge it, she knew it was important. The first step toward change came later that day, in the form of a brief but crucial conversation with Jake. "Emily, how's the prototype coming along?" he asked as they sat down for their weekly check-in. "It's going well," she replied, though she felt a twinge of guilt as she said it. "But I've been feeling the pressure. I think we might need to reevaluate some of our deadlines. I'm not sure I can keep pushing my team at this pace without risking burnout." Jake didn't immediately respond. Instead, he took a deep breath and nodded. I understand, he said quietly. I've been pushing you hard, haven't I? Emily looked at him, surprised. Jake wasn't one to easily admit such things. I've been so focused on getting this project off the ground that I didn't stop to consider how it was affecting you, and your team. We'll scale back. Let's take a step back and reevaluate. No one gets their best work done while running on empty. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she could feel the burden she had been carrying lighten just a little. Jake's recognition of the pressure she was under made her realize she wasn't alone in this fight. The rest of the week was marked by a shift in mindset. Emily took Jake's advice to heart and restructured the team's timeline. She also made time for herself, leaving the office at a reasonable hour and reconnecting with friends. Her creativity began to flow more freely, and with a clearer mind, she found that the project started falling into place in ways she hadn't expected. By the end of the week, Emily realized something important: the journey wasn't just about the destination. It was about how she took care of herself along the way. She had learned the hard way that there was no point in chasing success at the cost of everything else. Her well-being, her relationships, and her peace of mind were just as important as the goals she had set. And as the project continued to evolve, Emily found herself not only leading her team with more confidence but also reconnecting with the parts of herself that had been buried under the pressure. Sometimes, the greatest challenge is not conquering the world, it's conquering yourself. As she looked toward the next phase of the project, Emily knew that the storm she had faced was a necessary part of the journey. But the calm, the self-awareness that followed, was what would truly guide her toward success. Emily was beginning to feel like herself again. The weight of the last few weeks had started to lift, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of balance between her work and her personal life. Her team was moving forward with the prototype, their progress steady and solid, and she was able to take a step back to focus on the bigger picture. The sleepless nights and endless days were finally starting to pay off. Things were falling into place. But as with any journey, there are moments when everything threatens to come crashing down. Emily was about to face one of those moments. It was a Friday afternoon, and the team had gathered for their weekly progress meeting. There was a sense of optimism in the air. They had made great strides in the last few days, and everyone seemed energized. Emily felt a renewed sense of confidence, ready to face the next phase of the project head-on. They were on the verge of something big. But then, everything changed in an instant. Just as Emily was about to update Jake on the team's progress, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from an anonymous number. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. The message was short but enough to send a jolt through her body. "We know about your project. Stop or else." Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at the message, feeling a chill wash over her. What did this mean? Who was this? And why did they want her to stop? She quickly scanned the message again, trying to make sense of it. It didn't make sense. There had been no indication that anyone was watching them, no threats, no signs of trouble. Or so she thought. Her thoughts were interrupted by Jake's voice. "Emily? Is everything okay?" She snapped her phone shut and tried to compose herself, but the anxiety was already taking hold. She was no longer in the room with her team. Her mind was elsewhere, spiraling through 1,000 possible explanations for the cryptic message. Could it be the competition? Could they have found out about Innovate Tech's project? Emily looked around the room, her focus unfocused. She could see the concern on the faces of her team members. Her silence must have been noticeable. "Emily?" Jake asked again, his voice softer this time. She shook her head, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had gripped her. "Sorry, just, something came up," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's keep going." But even as the meeting continued, she couldn't concentrate. Every word, every suggestion felt like it was in a different world. Her mind kept returning to the message. Who had sent it? And what did they mean by, stop or else? After the meeting ended, Emily was left alone with her thoughts. She sat in her office, replaying the conversation over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of it. What had she gotten herself into? Was someone trying to sabotage the project? Was it personal? She called Sarah, needing to talk it through. Sarah's voice was a lifeline, steady and calm. You've been through so much already," Sarah said. "You've faced adversity before, and you'll face it again. But you can't do this alone. Whatever's going on, you have to be careful. You're not just fighting for success, you're fighting for your safety, too." Emily nodded, though Sarah couldn't see her. I know. But this just feels different. I don't know who I can trust." "Trust yourself. You've gotten this far because you're strong. You've got this. Just stay focused and keep your eyes open. If there's something going on, we'll figure it out together." The reassurance in Sarah's voice gave Emily a sense of comfort, but the uncertainty still gnawed at her. What if this was just the beginning? What if the worst was yet to come? The weekend passed in a blur, with Emily working tirelessly to gather more information about the mysterious message. She reached out to her network, trying to find out if anyone had seen anything suspicious. But no one knew anything. No one had any leads. It was as though the message had appeared out of thin air, vanishing just as quickly as it had arrived. By Monday morning, Emily knew that she couldn't let this distraction take over. She couldn't afford to lose focus, not now, not when they were so close. She showed up to work, determined to continue with the project as if nothing had happened, though the seed of doubt remained deep within her. But as she entered the office, she found that the situation had already escalated. The first thing she noticed was the tense atmosphere. People were whispering, casting nervous glances at each other. It didn't take long for Emily to realize that something was off. Jake met her in the hallway, his expression grim. "Emily, we need to talk." They stepped into his office, and Jake closed the door behind them. "We've had a situation," he said, his voice low. "I just received word that our competitor has launched a counteroffensive. They've already approached several of our key partners, offering better terms. If we don't act fast, we're going to lose everything." Emily's mind raced. It was exactly what she had feared, the message, the threat, it had all led to this. The competition had found out about Innovate-Tech's project, and now they were trying to steal their partners away before they could launch their prototype. She felt a sense of helplessness wash over her. They had worked so hard, poured everything into this project, and now it was all at risk. "We need to act fast," Jake continued. "But Emily, I'm afraid it's worse than just the competition. There's something else. We've had reports that some of our internal systems have been compromised. We're looking into it, but I think there may be more going on here than just business competition." Emily's stomach dropped. Was someone inside the company leaking information to the competition? Had they been infiltrated? The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture was darker than she had imagined. It wasn't just about competing in the marketplace, it was about sabotage, betrayal, and a fight for survival. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden realization: she needed to take control of the situation. She couldn't afford to sit back and wait for answers to fall into her lap. It was time for action. "I'll handle this," she said, her voice firm. "We'll secure our systems and make sure we're ready to face whatever comes next." Jake looked at her, a mixture of concern and admiration in his eyes. "Be careful, Emily. This goes deeper than we thought." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. But she knew that, no matter what, she had to press forward. There was no turning back now. As she left Jake's office, the tension in the air was palpable. Innovate-Tech was at a crossroads. Their future was uncertain, and the danger was real. But Emily was more determined than ever to protect what they had worked so hard to build. The storm was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Emily stood at the edge of her office, gazing out the window, her mind racing. The storm was no longer just an abstract concept, it was real, and it was bearing down on Innovate Tech. She had known from the start that the project would be tough, that there would be challenges, but she hadn't anticipated this. The realization that someone inside their company might be working against them was a bitter pill to swallow. But it was the only logical explanation for the leaks, the sabotage, and now the competition's calculated moves. Someone had to have tipped them off. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She turned and saw Jake standing in the doorway, his face etched with concern. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, stepping inside. "I know," she replied. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" Jake nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he held a folder of documents. "We've been digging deeper into the system compromises. Our IT department just found traces of a breach. Someone was inside our network for weeks before we even noticed." Emily's heart sank. The idea that someone they trusted was working against them felt like a punch to the gut. "Do we know who?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. "We don't have definitive proof yet," Jake said, sitting down across from her. "But we've narrowed it down to a few key suspects. People who had access to the most sensitive information. The team has already started investigating, but I thought you should know. We can't move forward with the project until we figure this out. Not with these security risks hanging over our heads." Emily rubbed her temples. This was a nightmare. She had worked too hard, everyone had worked too hard, for it to all fall apart now. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly, the weight of her words settling heavily in the room. "We need to find the mole, Emily," Jake said, his tone grave. "We can't afford to let them sabotage us further. We'll lock down all communications, cut off access to sensitive data, and—" "Wait," Emily interrupted, her mind suddenly clear. "Cutting off access might make things worse. Whoever's behind this is smart. If we cut off access, they might go underground. We need to force them out into the open." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "How do you suggest we do that?" Emily leaned forward, her eyes flashing with determination. "We keep everything running like normal. We continue the project, push forward, but we also start planting false information. We feed our internal team fake updates, give them altered specs, or even misinformation about our prototype's progress. The mole will try to use that information. We'll catch them when they make their move." Jake was silent for a moment, considering the risk involved. "It's risky," he said slowly. "But it's our best shot. We don't have any time to waste. Let's do it." Emily felt a rush of adrenaline. It was the first plan she had felt truly confident about in days. They had to act quickly, and smartly. They needed to be one step ahead of whoever was trying to bring them down. They spent the next few hours crafting a plan. Jake gathered the key members of the leadership team while Emily began working with their head of security to set the trap. She didn't sleep that night. Every hour was spent refining the details of the false information, ensuring that they had everything in place. They would make the next move the mole would expect, and then watch as it unfolded. By morning, the plan was in motion. They fed their fake updates to the team, knowing that whoever was working against them would eventually take the bait. Emily felt a sense of unease, the constant hum of anticipation in her chest. Would they really catch the mole? Would it work? The waiting game began. For days, the tension was unbearable. Every new communication felt like a test, a signal that they were about to discover who was behind the leaks. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But then, just as the days of unease started to feel like an eternity, something unexpected happened. One morning, while reviewing the progress of the project, Emily received an encrypted email from the company's head of security. The subject line was simple: "We have a lead." Her pulse quickened as she opened the email. The message contained a screenshot of a conversation that had taken place in the middle of the night between one of Innovatech's trusted employees and a competitor. The conversation was damning, a clear indication that the employee had been feeding sensitive information about their project to the competition. It was Jonah, the head of their research and development department. Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. Jonah had been with Innovatech since the very beginning. He was one of the first people she had trusted, one of the faces of the company. How could it be him? Her mind reeled as she processed the information. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. Jonah had always seemed loyal, always had the best interests of the company at heart. To think that he had been secretly working against them was a gut punch. "We need to confront him," Jake said, his voice tight. "Now." Emily nodded, though a part of her hesitated. This wasn't just about stopping a sabotage. It was about confronting someone she had once called a friend. They found Jonah in his office, his back turned as he worked on a prototype for a different project. When Emily and Jake entered, he looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "What's going on?" Jonah asked, though there was a nervous edge to his voice that Emily hadn't noticed before. "We know what you've been doing," Emily said, her voice cold but steady. "We have proof that you've been leaking our project's details to the competition." Jonah's face went pale, his breath catching in his throat. He didn't try to deny it. Instead, he slowly stood up, his eyes avoiding theirs. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling. "I never wanted it to come to this. I didn't have a choice. Didn't have a choice." Emily repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You betrayed us, Jonah. You betrayed me. I was under pressure. They promised me a better position, more resources. I thought. You thought you could play both sides," Emily finished, the anger rising in her chest. "You thought you could sell us out to save yourself. How many times have we worked together, Jonah? How many times did I trust you?" Jonah's eyes welled with tears, but Emily didn't feel sympathy. She couldn't afford to. He had made his choice, and now Innovatech was paying the price. "I'm sorry," Jonah whispered, his voice breaking. "I thought it was the only way. I didn't think they'd go this far." "Then you underestimated us," Jake said, his voice sharp. "We've already informed the authorities. You're done." The realization hit Jonah like a ton of bricks. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions. As he was escorted out of the building, Emily felt no satisfaction, only a deep sense of loss. She had learned the hardest lesson of all: loyalty could be a fragile thing, and trust could be shattered in an instant. But she also knew that Innovatech would survive this. They had faced betrayal, but they had come out stronger for it. Now, it was time to rebuild. The fight wasn't over yet, but Emily was ready. The storm had passed, and Innovatech was stronger for having weathered it. And as for Emily, she had learned the importance of trust, both in herself and in the people around her. She couldn't do it alone, and that was a truth she would carry with her moving forward. The days that followed Jonah's betrayal were a blur of meetings, investigations, and hard decisions. Innovatech, bruised but not broken, faced an uncertain future, but one thing was clear: Emily was not about to let this setback define them. The company had been through a storm, but now, it was time to rebuild stronger than ever. Emily stood in the center of the office, watching her team go about their work with renewed determination. There was a sense of unity in the air, as though the worst was behind them, and now they were ready to rise from the ashes. Innovatech wasn't just a company to her, it was a family that had been through the fire and come out stronger for it. The first order of business was securing the project. With Jonah's betrayal still fresh in their minds, Emily and Jake moved quickly to tighten the security protocols, ensuring that nothing like this could ever happen again. They implemented new internal audits, reviewed every line of code, and gave their team the tools to track any suspicious activity. It was a hard, exhausting process, but it was necessary to regain the trust of everyone involved. Emily knew that regaining trust wasn't just about systems and processes, it was about people. She needed her team to feel like they were safe again, that they weren't just another target in a ruthless business world. And to do that, she had to lead by example. One of the first steps in rebuilding was addressing the team directly. Emily gathered everyone in the main conference room for an all-hands meeting, something she hadn't done in a while. There was an energy in the room as her employees filed in, a mix of hope and anxiety. They had been through a lot, and now they needed to hear from her. "Thank you for being here," Emily began, standing at the front of the room. "I know the last few weeks have been difficult. I know we've all had questions, doubts, and fears. I'm not going to pretend that what happened was easy, but I want you all to know this: we're still here. We're still fighting. And we will come out of this stronger than ever." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. What happened with Jonah wasn't just about one person betraying us, it was a wake-up call. It reminded us that we have to be vigilant, that we have to trust one another, and most importantly, we have to move forward. "We've got a mission, a vision, and we're not stopping now." There was a murmur of agreement from the crowd. Emily could feel the tension begin to ease as her words resonated with her team. They had all been shaken, but they were ready to fight again. "The road ahead won't be easy," she continued. "But we've faced adversity before, and we're stronger for it. Together, we will finish what we started. And together, we will succeed." As she spoke, Emily felt a sense of resolve wash over her. It was a moment of clarity. She wasn't just leading Innovate Tech, she was part of something much bigger. This company was more than just a project. It was a testament to the resilience of the people who made it work. And no one, not even Jonah, could take that away from them. After the meeting, Emily sat down with Jake to discuss the next steps. They had a lot of work ahead of them, but the most immediate concern was getting their prototype back on track. The competition had already launched their counteroffensive, but Emily wasn't intimidated. Innovate Tech had something they didn't, a team that was willing to go above and beyond, a team that had proven they could overcome anything. "I'm not going to lie, Jake," Emily said as they reviewed their strategy. "The competition is tough, and they've got resources we don't have. But we've got something they don't." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Us," Emily said, her voice firm. "We've got a team that's been through hell and back and is still standing. And when we get our prototype ready, it's going to blow them out of the water." Jake nodded, a slow smile creeping onto his face. "I like that. Let's make it happen." The next few months were a whirlwind of progress. The team worked harder than ever, pulling together to refine the prototype, fix the bugs, and perfect every detail. There were setbacks, of course, delays, frustrations, and moments when it felt like they would never reach the finish line. But with every challenge, Emily saw the strength of her team. They were united in their resolve to succeed. As they neared the final stages of the project, Emily knew that they had something special. The prototype was ready for launch, and it was going to make waves in the industry. But more importantly, it was a symbol of everything they had overcome. Innovate Tech wasn't just about the product, it was about the people behind it. When the launch day finally arrived, Emily stood in front of the team, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it. The culmination of months of hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance. "You've all put in so much," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "Today, we make history. Today, we show the world what we're capable of. And no matter what happens, I couldn't be prouder of what we've built together." The team erupted in applause, and for a moment, everything felt right. The challenges of the past seemed distant, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and hope for the future. The launch was a resounding success. Innovate Tech's prototype not only held its ground against the competition but surpassed it. They were on their way to becoming a leader in the industry. And while Emily knew that there would always be more challenges ahead, she also knew that they were ready to face them. In the months that followed, Innovate Tech continued to grow. They expanded their team, forged new partnerships, and solidified their place in the market. But even as they reached new heights, Emily never lost sight of the lessons she had learned, that trust is earned, that resilience is key, and that success isn't just about the destination. It's about the journey. As she sat in her office, looking out over the city, Emily smiled. The future was bright. The storm had passed, and now, it was time to enjoy the calm. Innovate Tech had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever, and Emily knew that this was only the beginning. And with that, she closed her laptop, ready to take on whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but now, they were unstoppable. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?